It's a big part of our mission, not only to become a home for artists, but also a home for culture and culture building. Another way in which we've been a home for culture is through our education program. We're training young kids of color to run our cultural institutions of tomorrow.
The Apollo has helped me fully realize my love of the entertainment industry.
This place has showed me that there's no limits to what I can do.
At the center of culture, creativity, art, and activism is the soul of American culture. The world-famous Apollo has been a beacon of Black cultural expression for 88 years. More than just a theater, its famous stages are central to our history, having presented the most preeminent artists and thinkers of our time. As a presenter and a commissioner, the Apollo is one of the most iconic nonprofit performing arts centers in the world. The past, present, and future of Black excellence is the Apollo, and your support will make you part of its enduring legacy. Become a member or make a donation today. At the center of culture, creativity, art, and activism is the soul of American culture. The world-famous Apollo has been a beacon of Black cultural expression for 88 years. More than just a theater, its famous stages are central to our history, having presented the most preeminent artists and thinkers of our time. As a presenter and a commissioner, the Apollo is one of the most iconic nonprofit performing arts centers in the world. The past, present, and future of Black excellence is the Apollo, and your support will make you part of its enduring legacy. Become a member or make a donation today.
Welcome to Apollo Education's career panel, Costume Design, Telling the Story and Creating the Character, a two-part conversation. I'm your host and Apollo Theater Academy alum, Malcolm Smith. Tonight, we'll be introducing you to two costume designers who are paving the way for the next generation of artists. I'll be talking to Christelle Matou, who is an award-winning production and costume designer. And a little bit later in our panel, we'll hear from Paul Tazewell, a Tony and Emmy award-winning costume designer. Paul was just recently nominated for an Oscar for West Side Story, which is so exciting. And Christelle actually had a chance to speak to him. We can't wait to hear that conversation. But before we get there, let's start here. So please, let's digitally welcome Christelle Matou. Hey.
Hi, Michael.
How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here with all of your fabulous hair.
I'm excited about our conversation.
Without question, costume designers definitely play such an essential role in, bringing memorable characters to life. I think if we think back on shows that we like or movies we like, we can probably pinpoint a couple people where you're like, oh, this person had dope style. I really enjoyed how they did this. So I'm curious, who are some memorable people in your own life who have influenced how you approach costume designing?
I think what influenced me at first, I think it's from my, subconsciously from my grandmother, who was a seamstress and in the Caribbean and making clothes for people, around. She lived in the city of Pointe-à-Pitre in Guadeloupe, and made a living out of it. And also my mother was not in the trade, but picked up on it and was making clothes for us, especially those that the designers that we couldn't get to. And she would just, make a version of it for us that we could sport in high school. But ultimately, in terms of professionally, when I went to NYU for my MFA in costume design, they have a great program, and the teachers there, Susan Hilferty and Constance Hoffman, opened my mind about how to design, how to approach design. But it's not about approaching design; it's how to approach the storytelling.
So let's go back a little bit. So before you ended up at NYU, when did you know you wanted to get into costume designing? Like, what is the moment where you say, oh, this is a career path and I need to get into it?
I was a late bloomer in that because I'm from the Caribbean, and I'm from a family where, no one was involved in the arts on at a professional level in my close surroundings. So I did, what was instilled in me is that you either become a doctor or a lawyer. So I did that. I went into law and actually became an attorney, but I always felt like something that was not living. I mean, you hear it a lot these days, but it's true. I was not living I was not being my true self, and something was missing. And I think once I had my child, I didn't want to go back to work until I did something that I know I could leave my son behind and know that I'm passionate about. It's not a luxury that all mothers can make. And I had a very supportive and still have a very supportive husband. But one day I said, okay, I had a very great friend of mine who sadly passed away, who was an actor at the time. Owiso Odera, and he saw that we always had conversation about films, about and I also, he knew how much I love fashion, and he says, I think you should look into it. And I said, it's crazy. I said, that's why you should do it, because
Yeah.
So I did, and I went. That's at this moment he encouraged me, and at this moment that I applied to school, and for me it was almost at the Hail Mary.
What are some of your heavy inspirations before getting into the industry?
I would say one time I was watching the Dangerous Liaisons, um, uh, Liaison Dangereuse. It was in French, as I'm in French, and uh, my husband got annoyed because I would stop the film and to observe what kind of buttons were used. I was like, can we just watch it? And I said, but look at
Yeah.
this. That's just genius. So that's when it sounded a little bit odd
Mhm.
that I will zoom into this kind of details. And to someone who might not have the same I would say interest into clothes, it's not something that would be noticed, but I would look for those things.
All right, so let's dive a little bit deeper into some of your work. So let's talk about the short film, The Mailbox, which you were the costume designer for. So much of costume designing is really about communicating like a personality or even better, a moment through garments. In the sci-fi short, The Mailbox, you had to design for both present day as well as the 1940s.
Yeah.
How did you approach juggling two time periods in one project? Because one time period seems like a lot of work. So two, I could not imagine.
You follow the thread, the thread of the story. And I didn't see it as two different. I didn't see it as two different world, because they're connected, and the story itself is a connection between a great grandson and his great grandfather through time.
Mhm.
So, but then the feeling is the same for both world. And then it's just about the conversation with the director Louis Yin, and we started with the main characters and what they are trying to achieve and the emotions, and after that is just a circle that expands into the other characters.
Let's go big picture now. As someone that is, I'm going to say this for you, as someone that is very established in their career, I'm sure there are a decent amount of offers coming across your table. What drives you, or what drives you to your decision to work on a particular project? What does a story need to have to say, okay, I'm going to work on this?
It starts with my read, the read of the script or the play. I just, if I don't see anything, I'm not connecting with it.
Okay.
But sometimes you just
Sorry.
have to,
And when you say see anything, you mean you actually visualizing the world,
I
right?
visualize.
Okay.
I have some images that pop in my head, and it's usually a good time. But sometimes, as a recent designer in this industry, you just sometimes just have to work, So
You gotta eat.
yeah, you're gonna
You
pay
got to
the rent.
eat.
So I just found another way. It's one of the things that when you blocked or you don't get anything starting, it's just to let it sit a little bit and just find another way into it. But if you have instantly some images that come into my mind, or feelings or colors, I never know how it is. I feel like it's almost like like a medium quality, but you never know how it's going to come to you. Sometimes it's just how it would feel outside or indoors, or hot, cold, or
Yeah.
colors, or sometimes the characters themselves.
So you said a lot of the conversations about these types of things happen before you get, before you're ideally on the project, correct?
Yes, ideally.
Okay.
But
So Okay. So how different is that, or what is the difference between that and then working on a stage production? I know in 2010 you did a production of The Great Disappointment. Are they also kind of talking through costumes before you come on board and then you come in, or how are those timelines similar and or different?
So yes, the Great Disappointment was when I was. It was a the reason it was a productions while I was at NYU, but it was a production that was a new play, and so it was not fully written when we started the conversation.
Okay.
But what happens with stage is that the production meetings ensure that there is a communication, that we are not blindfolded into our lane. So the production meetings are for that purpose essential at times, if we never worked together, because sometimes when you work with designers that you work with previously, it's not as formal, but you know how they what their process
It's a bit of a shorthand.
Yes. So for stage, it's a slower process, I think, and you have the time to explore and have conversations and tweak what doesn't work out on during tech, and
Right.
films is.
What do you think is the most, I guess, important element of collaborating with the director as a costume designer?
The most important element, I think, is not assuming that people can read what's in your mind.
Okay.
Because we get so absorbed. I mean, the director, before they approach designers, or they already been, especially if they wrote the screenplay, they're already in that world, and it's part of their every day, just thinking about it and how they're going to make it happen. And then so it's about communicating that what they have in mind, because ultimately it's a story they are trying to tell, and the designs are there to support that storytelling and enhance it. So that's the most important thing. And also it's the same, it goes both ways. If for me as a designer, I get very absorbed by the process and the characters, and I think about them. Once I start, I just think about them, and and they become real in my mind. But I have to communicate that as well on a regular basis, because it's easy to get absorbed in the design, get excited about it, and keep designing, and just sometimes you might be caught up in it, but you have to have checkpoints at the different phases of the design. That way you don't you have a progressions towards a meeting of the minds and a meeting of the imagination between both the directors and the designer.
Okay. So, and now specifically keeping it on just like for a film set, you have your director at the top, but you also have a bunch of other departments you're working with, i.e. the scenic department, the production designer, the lighting designer. There's so many other departments that I'm assuming you have to check in with before you can truly lock in, a costume for a character. How do those collaborations influence or also inform how you're getting to the final look?
Ideally, it's starting with an early conversation, and the most important one of the most important ones when it comes to film is with the director of photography. So the DP needs to, he's the one who helps the director take the stories to different places and different angle to enhance emotions or space. And if I know what are the shots, and what is intended, what is a plan, it informs my designs. And in any productions, you have to be aware of the budget. So one ways to stay true to the budget is to not waste money because you design for something that's not going to be seen, you know. So for me, ideally is that, I mean, but I'm a Hindi film designer, so sometimes you, as a designer in that industry, you know, you are approached at a later time in the production process.
Yeah.
So those conversations might have taken place before I come on board, but
Okay.
it's all about communication with everyone, what we want to achieve, and I think it starts with keeping in mind what the director wants to create in the storytelling visually.
Okay. Okay. So speaking about working with welders and going, I guess, really more so into your network of designers to get stuff done. Let's talk about the Magic Flute, an opera that you worked on. So I feel like designing costumes, for me personally, I'm always in such, you know, admiration of other people on sets. And people are like, oh, you wrote the thing. And I'm like, no, but you shot it. Like, you set design. Like, I'm always so like, this is really like hard work. So I'm curious, how many pieces, or, you know, and I'm thinking just wardrobe generally, but also like accessories, like all of those different types of things. How many pieces in this project were more 1700-esque? Like, how, because really my question is, so you design it, you know, conceptualize it. How are you bringing these pieces to life? Because I'm sure finding clothing, well, I don't know, but I assume finding clothing from the 1700s is not super easy. How are you going about that?
Well, we really did not look into the, you know, the fashion, historical fashion. We
Okay.
invented a world. We invented a world that is sometime in the future. So,
Okay.
so for that reason, there's not a lot of, we were very fortunate to have a fantastic costume shop, and with wonderful drapers, and we build the pieces. You know, we just build them. And also it was important for us to inject some African influences. And when you look at an opera like Magic Flute, where iconic performers such as Eric Owens, but also up-and-coming opera performers like Aaron Crouch, Victoria Lawal, Helen Huang, you know, Ron Dukes, Jonathan Rhodes, are BIPOC performers, and it was very important for us to inject some not only Asian but also African influences into the designs.
All right. So lastly, before we get out of here, I'm just curious. I feel like as someone that works in this industry, I'm sure you're also a fan of this industry. Who are some current costume designers that are inspiring you?
I'm trying not to jump to Paul Tazewell, because
I mean, let's go for it. Let's go for it.
because it was like, oh, you know, he's also a part of this segment. But I must say that once I met Paul, who came to our school more than once to talk to these student designers, and also see their work. I was very impressed with his persona, and that, but very calm, but also you know, through his work you see it's always buzzing for him, you know, and the amount of work that he puts into his design, and I really believe in that. If it's another thing, is that it's for anyone. If you, I do believe if you work hard, you might not get right away the dream job that you want, but it will lead you there. So he's one of my inspiration, but also, as I mentioned, Miss Ruth Carter, um, advice about remembering your mentors and what you were taught, but also how both they are working with, and I'm very grateful for the vendors and the makers around them. And uh, there are other designers. I just feel like, no, being a BIPOC, and what, even if they are very well established, I'm sure that even today they have to keep the foot at that door so it doesn't,
Yeah.
so they could stay in the room. So
Right.
there's a different challenge as a rising designer, but also as one as established, and I'm very aware of that.
Okay, so speaking of the younger generation, what are some of your hopes and advice that you would give to young designers of color that are stepping into the world of theater and the film industry?
Um, I had that conversation recently, actually,
Okay.
with two a couple of BIPOC student designers, and my first advice to them is, uh, it's already in you. You did not really choose that profession. It's a passion. There's not a lot of costume design or designers. It's just, when you look at, and in particular backward designers, I think it's about, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8% are BIPOCs. So uh, so you didn't choose it because you are passionate about it, and there's a passion that will keep you going, because you will have ups and a lot of downs.
Yeah.
So just remember of why you made that choice, why you decided not to go for the uh 9 to 5 job that will give you the security and maybe ambition that some of your parents might have for you. And also, so you believe in yourself with that, but also get a foot into the real world of that industry as soon as you can, even if you are just shadowing someone, because you will become very quickly aware of what is expected of any designer, but also what is expected. Um, Unfortunately, there are different expectations still for BIPOC designers. So the sooner you see that, and it informs your drive, but also get a advantage on responding to the answer that you don't have enough experience. So even if you're just working for as a student, but in a real production stage or film, get started as soon as possible, and also know your value, because more often than not, I think we need to shift. For a long time, it was, start working for free. And I think, we need to shift from that. We should appreciate the value of anyone who's putting work into the design of a production. And if it's not monetary, but at least to if it means that, oh, can I get on the next production and shadow you for something, try to always have some awareness of your value from the get-go.
What is the shift that needs to happen to expand, diversity in the industry? What's not happening that needs to be happening?
I mean, there's so many aspects of that created that mistrust or not enough trust in the abilities of BIPOCs in this industry. And but I would say, for for me, I believe in what education can do, and the new students and faculty. If this is already inclusive and attracts BIPOC student designers and directors and producers, it's just that's what it will take to have that shift. Right now we're still in an industry where many have started in an era where it was much more predominantly white. But I think it would have to start. We could talk about legislation, social economic issues, all of that. But at the core, I think the new generation is the ones going to shape that shift. And those who are already ahead or want to be allies in all of the other aspect that the structure of legislation and social economic issues, and have to support those younger ones.
Well, listen, you've led us right into it. We should just get into this conversation with you and Paul, which I'm so excited to see. Christelle, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. Such a great conversation with so many gems. Part 2 of our conversation with Paul will begin right now.
I'm grateful to the Apollo Theater for setting up that opportunity to share experiences as designers. And but before we dive into the world of costume design, I would love to hear today about your journey, starting with a glimpse of your personal story.
Absolutely. Well, first off, Christelle, I am delighted to be here with you, and thank you so much for inviting me to have this conversation. Some of my history. I grew up in Akron, Ohio. I am the third of 4 boys that my parents had together. My dad was a research chemist for Firestone Tire and Rubber Company because, and we happened to be in Akron. Partly because he he worked for Firestone, and that was the rubber capital of America at that time. And my mom grew up in Akron and also in Omaha, Nebraska. And actually behind me is my grandmother's painting. So I come from ancestors of that are artists. And she was a painter, and my mom is a painter and very creative with her hands, and she taught me to sew. And there was always something creative going on in my house. Culture was huge. Education was huge. My mother was a French teacher and also an English teacher. And she's a complete Francophile, and she actually had a Fulbright scholarship and spent a year in Bordeaux and in Paris. So I think that was carried over to me through my umbilical cord, and I hold that same passion. Once I found the community of theater and what theater, how theater brought people together. And that was probably my first experience. One of my first main experiences was West Side Story, and I played Officer Krupke. And my older brother actually played Bernardo in this, it was the summer musical theater program. And I fell in love with it. So I decided that I would apply to Pratt Institute, and what they had was they had a program in fashion design, or they do still have a very strong program in fashion design. So I entered into that program, and I was there for a year, and the culture shock was just too much. And, you know, it was being in New York in the 80s. It was like, that was 82, 83 that I was here living in Brooklyn. So I transferred to North Carolina School of the Arts in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And I had family down there. You know, we've had family in the North Carolina area for a number of years. And I was there for the next 3 years. And probably my second year, I just gave in and committed to the fact that this was what was, you know, costume design, because that's how I entered as a costume design student. This is what was going on. I would let go of the idea of performance and really immerse myself and lean into costume design. And I, you know, excelled greatly in that program and decided to go on to graduate school. I went to NYU for a graduate study, and that was in 86. And then I graduated in 89 from NYU. And that last year at NYU, I mean, I loved that period of time in New York at NYU. But my last year, I met a director named Tazewell Thompson. He was directing, and I was designing a production of Yerma, Lorca's Yerma. And we hit it off. Our sensibilities were completely connected. And he, at the time, was the associate artistic director at the Arena Stage in Washington, D.C. And he introduced me, you know, as a designer to the theater, to Zelda Fitchandler and to the theater overall. And I came down to, or went down to Washington, D.C. the year after I graduated and interviewed to design a production of stand-up tragedy. And that was my first, I was given the job, and that was my first professional costume gig in a professional theater.
So, as I was mentioning, that you have been able to sustain your career and work on many exciting plays and films. And I think, you know, I would love to understand what drives your decision to work on a particular production, you know, so what makes you say yes to do a costume design?
Well, you know, it's changed greatly. You know, when I was talking about 20 years ago, 15 years ago, it was to, you know, it was the opportunity to design. You know, and I to a fault, I say yes, because I love designing. I love the act of designing. I love creating in that way. I'll consider it, for whether it's, for a couple of minutes or a week or so, regardless of who is asking me to design. I consider, what is the story that's being told? Have I ever told the story like this? How will it allow for me to expand as a designer? Who are the potential collaborators on the project? What is the venue? Will there be enough budget to carry out what my ideas might be? I mean, I'm weighing all of those questions. Where is it happening? Have I worked there before? What's the staffing that's there? Will they be able to carry out whatever it is? Sure. I mean, there was a period of time when I was, and that I still, have recently, and I've been working on 3 projects at the same time. Where I've got one project that I'm, absolutely focused on, one project that's just starting up, and another one that's just finishing up. I'm grateful for that. I mean, that's very fortunate to be a designer that can have that kind of opportunity. I think probably still needs to change, and many of those productions that I'm speaking of, it was a time when I was doing a lot of regional theater, and with regional theater, it's all away from home. It's in other cities other than New York. So I was, managing these different productions with, with different collaborative teams in each of these different places, so that I could maintain, life, so that I could pay the rent and, do some, those are very realistic needs, that designers have, while still embracing, the creative process, still, engaging and figuring out, how do I want to tell the story? How can I tell the story best with this, collaborative team? And that part was always exciting. The fact that I needed to take on work in order to live in New York and, live an adult lifestyle, that was, that is challenging. It's challenging for many designers.
He has to bleed, he has to die.
But one recent production was really significant in my opinion, and I'm referring to Fire Shut Up in My Bones at the Metropolitan Opera, because composer Terence Blanchard made history, as this was the first opera by a Black composer to be performed at the Met. And how meaningful was this for you? And can you talk about designing for opera?
Hugely meaningful for me to design Terence Blanchard's Fire Shut Up in My Bones. I mean, based on Charles M. Blow's memoir, and directed by the libretto written by Casey Lemons, who I worked on Harriet, who she directed Harriet, the film with Cynthia Erivo, and it was directed by both Camille Brown and James Robinson. And I think, because Charles M. Blow is just a little bit younger than I am, maybe 5 to 10 years younger than I am. But, a lot of our experience, our life experience, because of the times that we grew up in, they were very similar, and I think it was interesting for me to engage with that period, retelling the period that I actually was coming up. And, so there was a parallel there with what my point of view is, on that period and growing up as a Black man, or as a Black boy, and then as a Black man as well. And then to realize that, it was the first opera that had ever been staged on at the Met, that was composed by a Black composer. I think that it set the tone, and has come at a time when all of the U.S. is shifting and changing how we see, specific to us, the creativity of African Americans and people of Black descendants. So I think that all of that is very, very important. And I've been doing, at the same time, that's the kind of work that I have been doing for a very long time. And I think that there is while I'm hugely grateful that a light was shined on Fire Shut Up in My Bones, it's not the first, it's not the first in all of the diaspora of work that exists. There are stories that I will always be near and dear to my heart, like Bringing Genoa's Bringing the Funk. That was my first Broadway show. Caroline or Change. It was written about a Black woman, a Black woman's story, but but written by Tony Kushner, and directed by George C. Wolfe. So I think that there have been kind of culture changing productions that I've been a part of. That I'm so grateful to have been on the creative team to bring those forth.
So I'd like to talk about working with directors, whether for stage or film. What is to you the most important element of collaboration with a director?
Trust. Because I realized that after working with some directors that I felt like it was lacking. But fortunately I learned that early on, and also did some soul searching to figure out how I was getting in the way of that. But I think that would be the one word that I would use is most important, is developing a relationship of trust so that you can start to explore ideas. And there are times when you're bringing in, as a designer, you bring in ideas to a meeting within a group of collaborators, and it becomes very vulnerable to express what you're seeing, how you're imagining a story being told, or an idea, an image that speaks to you. I think that so that you can get at what a story is trying to say, I think that you have to dig deep into yourself and figure out where am I, and I learned this as well, is figuring out where am I, what is my story, how does my story, my Paul Tazewell story, inform how I see this story that I'm getting ready to design, so that I create some investment, some emotional investment in how I'm going to tell the story. And so that walks in tandem, hand in hand with that trust of a director and the trust of your other collaborators, your set designer and your lighting designer, your sound designer, to feel like you're being respected, your ideas are being respected. And it might be just as basic as I can pull this off. For us, you're trusting me to pull this idea off, and I have the confidence to do that with the staff that I have. And so I think that is a very kind of personal and organic place that I go to. But I think that it's one that has held true, definitely.
Well, looking at your body of work, I can't help but seeing that you often work with playwright and director George C. Wolfe, who's renowned for directing, of course, Angela America, Begin That Noise on the Town. I mean, we could go on. And is it that element of trust that made, or is there something else that made this collaboration with George C. Wolfe one that you both were willing to renew on several productions?
Well, absolutely. I mean, George is he's intimidatingly smart. And I'd been working at the Arena Stage for maybe 4 years before I met George, 4 or 5 years. He came down and he saw some work, I think, that I had done, and he invited me to design. He was the artistic director at the Public Theater at the time, and he invited me to design Venus, Susan Laurie Park's Venus, and also One Flea Spare. There were 2 plays that were being done in that season, and then right after that, I was invited to design the Broadway production of Bringing the Noise, Bringing the Funk. But he, when you're in a meeting with him, he floods the room with imagery and words. I mean, you know, he's a writer, so that's how he communicates. And you know, it's one word on top of another on top of another. And as a designer, I'm trying to take all of this information, all of these images, and we're not necessarily looking at images. He's describing, you know, how he's imagining a character or imagining a scene. And it's my job to take all that information and to make it something that is real and tangible. You know, those early years of working with George, he was really pushing me to dig deep, you know, to understand imagery and the poetry of imagery. The poetry of, you know, what I've turned around to create is the poetry of clothing and how that plays a part in the picture. And you know, it was always a learning, you know, and continues to be a learning experience working with George, because he just never stops. He's he's unrelenting. I mean, you know, it's really I cherish those moments working with him. I mean, working with Spike, he's another one, you know, brilliant, full of energy, and you know, and the way that he describes how he sees the world is very rich,
especially in New York.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. I worked on, I designed the New York and U.S. Scenes for Miracle at St. Anna. And then we did a few commercials together, and we've started other projects together, and they just haven't been completed yet. But you know, I find working with Spike exhilarating. I mean, you know, it's you know, you get into, you know, what's wonderful is if as a designer you can get into this you know, layer of artists that are working at a, you know, at a level that, you know, sometimes, you know, higher or more intellectual than I might feel like I, you know, fit in. You know, I think that, you know, and part of that is we're coming from two different places. My expertise is clothing, and how and the way that I tell stories is through clothing. The way that they tell stories, if it's, you know, if it's director, it's through language and through, you know, that process of directing actors and then creating the whole physical world and what that imagery might be.
2015 and Hamilton, of course. And I want to talk about Hamilton because it was a game changer, as we mentioned, in your as a pivotal production in your career to be known outside of everything that the industry knew you had done already.
I'm past patiently waiting, I'm passionately smashing every expectation, every action's an act of creation. I'm laughing in the face of casualties and sorrow. For the first time I'm thinking past tomorrow. And I am not throwing away my shot. I am not throwing away my shot. Hey yo, I'm just in my country, I'm not scrappy and hungry, and I'm not throwing away my shot. We're gonna rise, so it's time to take a shot. We're gonna rise, so it's time to take a shot. We're gonna rise up, rise up.
Period pieces require a vast amount of specific research. And for Hamilton, it must have been hundreds and hundreds of pictures and articles and other sources. Yeah. Once you had the bulk of your research, what were your next 2 or 3 steps in design process?
Lynn finished Hamilton, and it was going into the workshop phase, and I was invited into the room for a presentation, and I fell in love with it. I mean, I didn't quite know how to respond to it on the page when I was given a script, because there was no music to kind of understand it with. But pairing the music with the words, you know, it just all exploded, and I left crying, you know, that first presentation, and then we entered into the design phase, And it was trying to figure out how to best support this. What I realized was this masterpiece that that Lynn had written is just trying to figure out how to best realize who these characters are. And one of the first things that entered in was, because this is being written by the same person who wrote In the Heights, is the expectation that it's going to be a contemporary, set in a contemporary world. And so I started to put together a lot of images that were contemporary. They were all, people that were, it was either fashion that was influenced by the 18th century or other contemporary images. And at the same time, I was pulling together images that were period, that were, of the 18th century, the American Revolution. And after looking at all of these images, I mean, I must have had, if you looked at my Dropbox, there was probably 400 images, all, of actual clothes, of paintings, of, just all kinds of representation of, just things that I had in my head that I thought might work. And we decided when we were doing the staged reading to actually dress the cast and figure out if it would work to have them wear period clothes, or if it was best to represent it in contemporary clothes. I mean, there was really no way to find that out.
Talking about Hamilton, and of course, that was not your first musical, and you designed many other musicals, and To Prado with Jesus Christ Superstar, I can go on. Do you think that must have prepared you for West Side Story? Let's talk about West Side Story. It's just it's such a massive production and huge iconic characters with an equally iconic director. Of course, everybody wants to know how you felt when you learned that you got the job, because did you have a case of I don't know, imposter syndrome? I know I do. Every time I get something big, I was like, I don't know, but what gave you the confidence to take the leap? Is it that you felt comfortable with all the work that you had done in musical? Of course, everybody wants to know how you felt when you learned that you got the job, because did you have a case of I don't know, imposter syndrome? I know I do. Every time I get something big, I was like, I don't know, but what gave you the confidence to take the leap? Is it that you felt comfortable with all the work that you had done in musical?
I think that launching into West Side Story, I mean, being asked by Steven Spielberg to have a Skype meeting, was, it was unheard of. I mean, I just never thought that that would ever happen. It was outside of my, reality, actually.
Paul was certainly a new kid on the block because I used so many of the same people, film after film. But I love Paul's work. He designed all the costumes for Hamilton, and I really wanted to work with him on this.
And I knew that it was because of Hamilton that I had been asked to do it. I knew that Hamilton had made me visible in a way that he would even consider me. And I think that the fact that West Side Story is a musical was also, an important reason that he wanted to, engage me, to design. But yes, indeed, I had, previous to that, I had done Harriet, and had a ball. We, filmed it all in Virginia. And it was, as I mentioned, it was with Casey Lemons directing and Cynthia Erivo. And that was a period piece, obviously about Harriet Tubman. And, I understood what the scope of period film is and could be. And, I carry with me, it's in my blood. As I mentioned, West Side Story was my first introduction into the theater community and making theater. So it's been a part of me. That piece has been a part of me for, since the beginning. I also hold the original film in me as well. And when Stephen said that he wanted to re-envision what West Side Story could be, I was right up there for the task, and it was because I had done everything that I had done previous to that. I had done huge musicals on Broadway. I had dealt with the period of the 1950s. I had dealt with large-scale films. It was really, and it's always imperative for me that I have a team in place that really has the chops to do the job. Yeah, I mean, my first go-to was getting a wardrobe supervisor that had done a lot of work, and you're also, I do, I think about when I'm putting together a team, how can I position people, like what have they done before? With the wardrobe supervisor that we had, David Davenport, he had worked on other films with Stephen, and so was already embedded in what Stephen's process was. He had an introduction as to what that might be and how to set up a film for Stephen and for the people that worked with Stephen. And I thought that was a smart thing to do. I also, I pulled on an assistant that had, a lot of film work, but also had theatrical work as well. He has designed for Broadway. He understands what that process is, because we were walking into, making a lot of costumes, actually, building them in shops in and around New York, because we were filming in Brooklyn. And it needed to be, these pieces needed to be built to, be able to dance in daily, and, everything that you ask of Broadway clothes, that we wanted for, those clothes to have the same, both have the same design impact, but also, be durable. So with Brian, at the helm of the assistant team, we then had two other assistants come in that were, right under Brian. One that focused mostly on shoes, because we had
and dancing shoes.
A cast full of custom-made shoes, as well as a person who's, a fabric, kind of expert, maven, and with those four people, we really, then reached out from there. Then the tentacles go out, and we had an in-house shop that built a lot of our stretch shirts for our men, and some of the clothes, they were doing alterations regularly, and then for all the clothes, the period clothes that we, had fit on, our background, as well as some of the specialty things that we needed to have built in-house. So, it's a huge venture, and it becomes a machine, and talk about trust. I mean, that's where I have to put trust in a stellar team, so that I can focus on doing the work of a designer.
Just hearing you speak about all the layers, and it just shows how successful you've been at collaborating. And I think it's one of the many reasons why you are such a sought after designer with a prolific career. And to many looking at your career and awards, they would say, Paul, you've made it. What would you respond to that statement?
Like I just did, I'd take a deep breath, and I cherish what I've done. I was looking at it was an Instagram post, and it was some message about looking back and seeing what you've done. And I don't know that I've taken enough time to stop and turn back and reflect on what it is that I've done. I've had a lot of opportunities to talk about Hamilton and to talk about West Side Story, now, and other things that I've done. But I don't know if I've stopped long enough to really imagine what the ripple effect might be. And I'm hopeful that it will, inspire, the work that I've done will inspire that, that my work will be seen in a way that Irene Sheriff, who designed the original West Side Story, will be seen. I don't know, time will tell. But I think it is always whatever, it's making choices, saying yes to whatever will allow me to expand in a great and positive way.
Before I let you go, I would want to get another reflection, because often we wonder what we would tell our younger self. I know I would tell my younger self, don't wait and don't be afraid of your passion. What would you say to your younger self? But more importantly, what would you want your 80 or 90-year-old self to tell you today?
Those are two things.
Yes.
I think, looking at my younger self, I would tell young Paul to have courage, to have the courage to speak up and be yourself, and love who you are, and that things will work out beautifully. And for my 90-year-old self talking to me, it would be embrace it all, be present with where you are now, and from this point on, be present in the moment.
Well, thank you, Paul, for being such an open book about your personal journey and your career. And I hope that all who listen to our conversation will either relate or learn from your experience as a costume designer. I know I did. And Paul, I appreciate you, and thank you very much for chatting with me today.
Well, this is a delightful conversation, Christelle. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much.
At the center of culture, creativity, art, and activism is the soul of American culture. The world-famous Apollo has been a beacon of Black cultural expression for 88 years. More than just a theater, its famous stages are central to our history, having presented the most preeminent artists and thinkers of our time. As a presenter and a commissioner, the Apollo is one of the most iconic nonprofit performing arts centers in the world. The past, present, and future of Black excellence is the Apollo, and your support will make you part of its enduring legacy. Become a member or make a donation today. At the center of culture, creativity, art, and activism is the soul of American culture. The world-famous Apollo has been a beacon of Black cultural expression for 88 years. More than just a theater, its famous stages are central to our history, having presented the most preeminent artists and thinkers of our time. As a presenter and a commissioner, the Apollo is one of the most iconic nonprofit performing arts centers in the world. The past, present, and future of Black excellence is the Apollo, and your support will make you part of its enduring legacy. Become a member or make a donation today.
Tune.